Chapter 1. Welcome to Nowhere, yo, so check it. My name's Alex, but you can call me Lex. I'm this hotshot journalist from the city, right? Anyway, I was sent to this creepy little town called Nowhere. For real, that's its name. I guess it's pretty fitting, considering it's in the middle of freaking nowhere. I pulled up to the town sign, rusty and hanging by a thread, with the words, Welcome to Nowhere barely readable. The place had a vibe, you know. Like one of those old horror movies where you scream at the TV because you know the characters are doomed. Why'd they have to send me here? I muttered, slamming my car door. My editor was convinced this town's string of disappearances was gonna be my big break. Me? I just wanted to get in, get the scoop, and get out. First stop was the local diner, because every story starts there, right? The place was called Granny's Kitchen, and it looked like it hadn't changed since the 60s. I walked in, the bell above the door jingling, and every single head turned to stare at me. Awkward. Chapter 2. The Scoop? I slid into a booth and a waitress, probably in her mid-50s, but looking ancient with worry lines, came over. Her namtig, said Betty. What can I get ya, Han? She asked, giving me a half-hearted smile. Just coffee. Black, I replied. I glanced around, noticing the faded wallpaper and the quiet hum of conversation. I'm Alex, by the way, a journalist. I'm here to write about the disappearances. Betty's face went pale. She leaned in, lowering her voice. You should be careful asking about that. Folks here don't like strangers poking around. Yeah, I figured, I said, sipping the coffee she brought. It tasted like burnt rubber, but it was hot, and I needed the caffeine. Anything you can tell me? She glanced around, then whispered, People say the town's cursed. They talk about witchcraft, haunted woods, stuff like that. But it's just old stories, right? Right, I said, even though the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Thanks, Betty. Chapter 3. Digging Deeper. So, I had a lead. Curses, witchcraft, and haunted woods. Typical small-town horror stuff, but it was a start. I decided to hit up the town's library next. Maybe I'd find some old newspapers or records. The library was this dusty old building that looked like it was about to collapse. Inside, it was quiet, with a few people milling around. I found the local history section and started digging through old newspapers. That's when I met her. This girl, probably around my age, with wild black hair and eyes that seemed way too intense. She plopped down next to me with a stack of books. You the journalist? She asked. Yeah, I replied, a little taken aback. Alex. And you are? Raven, she said, no joke. My parents were hippies. Anyway, you're looking into the disappearances? Yep, I said. You got any info? She leaned in, her eyes flicking around like she was afraid someone would overhear. There's a reason people say this town's cursed, and it all starts with the woods. Chapter 4. The Woods? Raven and I decided to check out the woods she mentioned. It was late afternoon, and the sun was starting to set, casting long shadows over the town. The woods were at the edge of nowhere, dense and dark. As we walked, Raven filled me in on the town's history. Back in the day, there were these witches who lived here. They practiced dark magic, or so the stories go. When the townsfolk found out, they freaked and burned them at the stake. But before they died, the witches cursed the town. Nice, I said, trying to hide how freaked out I was. So, you believe all this? She shrugged. I don't know. But people have been disappearing for years, and no one ever finds them. It's like they vanish into thin air. We reached a clearing in the woods, where the trees seemed to form a perfect circle. In the middle was a large flat rock with strange symbols carved into it. This is it, Raven said. They call it the Witch's Circle. Chapter 5. Ghosts of the Past. Standing there, in that eerie circle, I could almost feel the weight of history pressing down on me. The symbols on the rock looked ancient and sinister, like something straight out of a horror flick. I don't like this place, I muttered, shivering. It feels wrong. Raven nodded. Yeah, I get that. But this is where it all started. If you want to know the truth, you have to start here. I took a few photos and some notes, feeling a mix of excitement and dread. We decided to head back before it got too dark. As we walked, I asked Raven more about herself. So how come you know so much about this stuff? She hesitated, then sighed. My brother disappeared a year ago. He was obsessed with the curse, thought he could break it or something. I've been trying to figure out what happened to him ever since. I'm sorry, I said, feeling a pain of guilt. This was more than just a story for her. Chapter 6. The First Night. That night, I holed up in the crappy motel on the edge of town. The place was run down and smelled like mold, but it was the only option. I spent a few hours going through my notes and the photos I'd taken. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I checked the windows and doors, making sure they were locked. Just as I was about to call it a night, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Raven standing there, looking spooked. "Can I come in?" "Sure," I said, stepping aside. "What's up?" She walked in, pacing nervously. "I found something. My brother's journal. I think you need to see it." She handed me a worn notebook. Flipping through it, I saw pages filled with ramblings about the curse, the witches, and the disappearances. There were drawings of symbols, maps of the woods, and descriptions of rituals. "This is intense," I said, looking up at her. "Your brother was serious about this." "Yeah," she said, her voice shaky. "And now he's gone. I think we're in over our heads, Alex." Chapter 7. Haunted. The next few days were a blur of research, interviews, and creeping dread. Everywhere I went, I felt like I was being watched. The townspeople were tight-lipped, avoiding my questions and giving me wary looks. Raven and I spent hours in the library, piecing together the town's dark history. We discovered that the disappearances happened in cycles, every 50 years, and we were right in the middle of one. One night, as I was reviewing my notes in the motel, I heard a strange noise. It was a low, guttural whisper coming from the direction of the woods. My heart pounded as I opened the door and stepped outside. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. There was no answer, just the rustling of leaves in the wind. I was about to go back inside when I saw a shadowy figure at the edge of the woods. "Who's there?" I shouted, but the figure disappeared into the trees. I stood there for a moment, shaken, before retreating back into my room. Chapter 8. The Ritual. Raven and I decided to visit the witch's circle again, this time at night. It was risky, but we needed answers. Armed with flashlights and her brother's journal, we made our way through the dark woods. The night was eerily silent, the only sound our footsteps crunching on the leaves. When we reached the clearing, the air felt charged with electricity. The symbols on the rock seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight. "We have to do the ritual," Raven said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's the only way to break the curse." "Are you serious?" I asked, my heart racing. "We don't even know if this stuff is real." She looked at me, her eyes full of determination. "I have to try, Alex, for my brother." I nodded, swallowing my fear. "Okay, let's do this." We followed the instructions in the journal, lighting candles and chanting the incantations. As we did, the air grew colder and the wind picked up, swirling around us. Suddenly, there was a blinding flash of light, and the ground shook. I felt a force knock me off my feet, and everything went black. Chapter 9. The Truth. When I came to, I was lying on the ground, the candles extinguished and the symbols on the rock dark. Raven was next to me, groaning as she sat up. What happened?" I asked, my head throbbing. "I don't know," she said, looking around. "But I think it worked. Look." I followed her gaze and saw a figure standing in the clearing. It was a man, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, with a wild look in his eyes. "Who are you?" I asked.